calls. This is the 2021 WGC St. Jude Initial Research Show. Hopefully you all had a very very successful in your betting endeavor week in the Olympics. I took the week off. Any advice that I would have given would have been superficial and speculation at best. So I just decided to take the week off. I hope you all found some information out there that helped you all profit. Made some good bets outright or successful DFS lineups and such. It was enjoyable for me. I just sat back, got to be a fan, just watched some good golf. So it was enjoyable. As I look down at my notes here, is a bit of a longer intro. I saw a lot of winners on social media that I follow, so hopefully you all joined in on that. Which, speaking of social media, the links to my social media, Twitter and Instagram, are in the description. Mainly going to be more important for the betting cards each week, as I'm planning on putting those out on Twitter at least, maybe both from now on, instead of presenting it at the end of the DFS Tactics show. So follow me on social media. Get some last minute advice or see my betting card. When you want to reach out, make fun of me. Either way, just give me a follow if you want to just hit me up and either get some advice or whatnot. So I promise you, I'll promise to get back to you on that whenever you reach out, or if you want to just leave some comments in the videos, I'll always get to those as well. As a reminder, chat is as always open during the live show, so please interact if you have any questions. Love the interaction, even if you're just making fun of me or tell me how you did in the Olympics. I really want to know. I saw some interesting lineups that would have cashed. I know Rory Sabatini went crazy in round 4, so hopefully you were on him if you were playing some Showdown. But as always, to end the introduction, all statistics provided by Fantasy National. It's an amazing resource. It's well worth the investment. I tell you this every episode. There's a reason I do it. With all of that out of the way, I think, let's dig into the initial research for the WGC St. Jude. And we're going to shift focus here and let my camera get in focus there. Again, this is the homepage for Fantasy National. For those who don't know, we are in Memphis, Tennessee this week for the WGC St. Jude Invitational. The field is a no-cut event, and it is 66 players. So when you are thinking about your betting and especially your DFS tactics, that with a no-cut event, it is going to be imperative that you get a 6-6 lineup through. But that's for more Wednesday and so on. For now, we're just going to take a look. I've set this at 36 rounds, just the simple base model. I've sorted by strokes gained total. And probably no surprise, the number one player the last 36 rounds is Colin Morikawa, coming off a pretty successful Olympics. Was in the playoff for the bronze medal, which those stats are not actually in Fantasy National at the moment. At least I don't think so. We'll check here real quick. It wasn't about an hour ago, yeah. So, but you can see why Colin Morikawa is number one in the field in strokes gained total. 3 straight top 5s in big events. So he's playing pretty good. Your top 5 are Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Louis Oosthuizen, Victor Hovland, and Patrick Cantlay. Probably no explanations needed there. All playing really solid golf. Followed closely by Brooks and Abraham Ancer, Casey, Harmon, and Schauffele. So congrats to Xander Schauffele for winning the gold medal. So the main thing I want to cover in the initial research show is to give some factors or some ideas about the course. And during the week off, I still looked around, tried to gather some information, and I found a site where it brings up the tournament information sheets before the tournament starts. And so I found this site, and as you can see, there is nothing for the WGC St. Jude or the Barracuda for that. As a matter of fact, as a reminder, this is a double event week. So I will have the Barracuda full show like I did for the Barbasol on Tuesday. But we're going to mainly focus on tonight and Monday and Wednesday on the St. Jude. That's the big tournament. But you can see here there's no data or no information sheet for this year's St. Jude. So I have to bring up last year's. And a couple of things to note. It plays to a par 70 that the yardage was last year 7,200 yards, or a little bit over. And that varies a little bit. In fact, when we check back to Fantasy National in the course breakdown on there, it actually labels it as under 7,200. So there's a bit of variance there, but it's right around 7,200 yards. So it's not a long course by any means. The course statistics is really striking, and it'll explain some of the data graphs in the course breakdown. Your average green size here at TPC Southwind, which again we're in Memphis, Tennessee at TPC Southwind, is 4,300 square feet. That is small by PGA Tour standards. I believe the average green size is 6,000 square feet. So you can tell these greens are really, really small. And you'll see that play out when proximities are a lot lower than the average tour event. Scrambling is much higher here. That's just because the greens are smaller. Don't really take into account those three. You've got 75 bunkers, but water comes into play on 11 holes. So you've got to be really precise, especially with your irons. I believe there are 2 holes where the water comes in off the drive, but mainly it's on your approach shots where the water comes in. So you're gonna have to be dialed in with your irons. And fortunately, there are a couple of ranges that really that a lot of the approach shots come from. So we'll be able to dig into that tomorrow in the data dive show. I was hoping that we would see something about the average centimeter. I don't see it, but the greens are Bermuda, and the fairways are Zoysia. So Zoysia is typically out west. It is a stickier grass. The ball will players call it sticky. It's not easy to get through, or it's less easy to get through, I should say, especially with chipping. So that's something to take into consideration whenever you're considering golfers for around the green play and such. But mainly I just wanted to bring up the fact that these greens are small, the number of water hazards in play, or holes with water in play, and the style of grass on the greens. So that's what this sheet is. I was hoping to get the 2021 sheet out. They just haven't put it out yet. So keep that in mind. We'll keep that in mind when we go to the course breakdown and conditions and such. But we'll come back here to Fantasy National, and one of the first things that we can kind of do is sort by putting, and we're going to take a look at some Bermuda this week. But yeah, so I didn't have to scroll there. So your top putter on Bermuda grass is actually Matthew Fitzpatrick, then followed by Kevin Kisner, Sung Jae, Xander, Patrick Reed, Sam Burns, Harmon, Bryson, Louis, and Billy Horschel are your top 10 in the past 36 rounds, a longer baseline. If you want to see who's just been on fire with a putter on Bermuda, a lot of overlap, but Patrick Reed, Jason Kokrak comes up, Billy Horschel, Louis Fitzpatrick, Stuart Sink, Victor Hovland, Desham, Sam Burns, and Justin Rose are your top 10 for the quote on fire the last 8 rounds, who's in really good form with the putter. That's one of the easy things to kind of take a quick look at, since we know the green type or green surface. But again, not a lot to go into here on the base model until we take a look at some of the more in-depth stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at Fantasy Nationals course breakdown for TPC Southwind. Again, plays to a par 70, and it's a fairly even course. It's not easy. It's not difficult. A slight amount more birdies than bogeys, but nothing to use the say difficult or easy filter on Fantasy National. It plays roughly to par. Maybe a quarter stroke easier than par. And you can see here the 2 par 5s. Not necessarily equal. You got 1.5 here and 3% here. So the 16th, the very attackable one, the easiest hole on the course. It's only 511 yards, but water comes into play, I think, on all of the hole, maybe? I can't remember. I could bring up the Pro Visualizer. There's a lot to talk about, so I decided not to. But again, if you're in chat, let me know. Is that something you want to see? How'd you do on your Olympics? Just jump in here. Let's have some fun. Make fun of me for not betting, which, to be honest, I was probably gonna lose. So, joke's on you. But going back to TPC Southwind, the 2 par 5s aren't necessarily eagleable. You do have to make your birdies. They're the 2 easiest holes. But the bigger thing that I want to focus on here is that 5 of the top 6 toughest holes on this course are the par 4s, and they're long. That's where the 7,200 mainly comes from, these longer par 4s. So the toughest is actually a converted par 5. Members at TPC Southwind actually play this hole as it's about a 530-yard par 5. In the WGC event, they convert it to a long par 4. And you can see there, a lot more bogeys than birdies. Your par here is a great score on the 5th hole here. Excuse me while I'm opening my Gatorade. So you're just trying to get a 4 and get out of there. That's the toughest hole. 2nd, 4th toughest, both fairly long par 4s, but these also have water in play. The 3rd toughest is a very short par 4 with a lot of water in play. And the 6th toughest is a par 3 that you just have to carry water. You just have to. I don't know. Is this one the carry the water, or is this the peninsula? There's a peninsula green here, not an island green, but a peninsula green, where if you are short left or right, you're done. Interesting par 3s around TPC Southwind. I like them. I can't remember if this is the peninsula one or the one you have to just carry. I might have to take a look later, but so those are your 6 toughest holes. These par 4s, and the tough par 3 on the back. So as you can see, you got a couple of difficult holes here in the front 9, but you're really trying to make your scores on the front 9, and then coming into the back 9, you're hoping to hang on and shoot even par to save your score, which is important to note when you are targeting golfers, say on a showdown, for instance. Your stretch, you want to target guys that are starting on the front 9. And we can get into that on the DFS tactics, but as far as DraftKings go, you get bonus points if a golfer gets 3 consecutive birdies. Well, those are that's about the only stretch of 3 holes that is reasonable. 12th, 16th, and 17th. Because in the 14, 18, you're covered with this tough par 3 and the tough par 4. So we'll get into that in the DFS tactics, but it is much, much nicer. TBC Southwind is much nicer to those who start on the front 9 as opposed to the back 9 for Thursday and Friday. We scroll down here. You can see what I would call a normal distribution here. Approach is always going to be, well, not always, but 90% of the time going to be the number 1 factor for winners and top 10s and 5s and such. Putting here is a lot more important, not necessarily as important as approach, but it is more important. And you have off the tee and off around the green are fairly close in terms of a normal distribution. If you remember, the 3M around the green was barely even visible. It just didn't matter. It was all approach and putting with a little bit off the tee. And that's why I was so high on Johnny Vegas. He ended up not coming through, but had a very good tournament. And Cameron Champ winning, his off the tee was great. His irons were great that week, and he made putts, and you're going to win doing that. And that kind of plays out here in this graph. The ball striking, which is off the tee and approach, outweighs the short game, which is around the green and putting. But it's not a drastic difference. Some of these graphs can be quite stark in difference. So ball striking going to be more important, but putting is still going to be something, especially with these small greens. If you do manage to hit the green in regulation, you're going to want to take advantage of that if other guys are having to scramble. So putting is certainly going to be important this week, as it is every week, but I tend to value approach style players, iron players like Corey Connors and Morikawa, as opposed to guys who are traditionally good putters like Adam Hadwin and players of that ilk. So coming to the strokes gained by par. Again, par 5s, as always, you're going to have to take advantage of the par 5s on any course, but sometimes this graph can be miles ahead of the other two. And the fact that it's very close tells you how important that these par 4s are. Being a par 70, you have your 4 par 3s, your 2 par 5s, and 12 par 4s. So I'm going to put a heavy emphasis on par 4 scoring, and we'll see here in a little bit that there are a lot of par 4s of the same distance. So we're going to be really digging into that tomorrow on the Data Dive show. Scrolling down, as I was just alluding to, the hole composition, your par 3s are kind of evenly split here. You got a very short one, medium length, and 2 fairly long ones. 6 of your 12, so half of the par 4s, fall in the 450 to 500 range, and there's not a lot of there's only one that's above 500 yards. So they're generally on the shorter side, which tells you how much the water comes into play on those holes, and how it's a kind of a club down course in the sense where you're not hitting driver off every par 4 tee. You're going to have to play some positional golf, and that shows itself here. You see that there are very rarely 200 plus yard iron approaches. The majority of them come in the 150 to 175. I'll just say 150 to 200. Those are quite a bit above tour average. So this is your forced layup range off the tee. You're hitting, driving irons or fairway metals to get yourself in position to attack the small greens. So we're definitely going to have to take a look at these two ranges, see who are on fire or traditionally very good from these ranges. But yeah, so when you have a lot of a commonality of distance of hole, say par 4s 450 to 500, and a approach shot distribution graph like this where the majority of approach shots come within a distance, that's a pretty good indication that that's an area we're going to want to narrowly focus. Or at least I'm going to this week. I don't know how much emphasis I'm going to put on it, but it's certainly going to be a part of the data model that I share with you all. Looking back again, this is a no cut event, but when TPC Southwind held I believe is the St. Jude Classic, it tended, when it first started, at least in the Fantasy National database, it was very difficult, and it kind of eased up over time and kind of averaged for about +2 and such, but you see it stopped in 2018 for TPC Southwind because the WGC is a no-cut event. So 2019 and 2020, everybody made the cut, so there's obviously no cut line. So, like I said, it can play. It plays a little bit easier than harder, but not by much. And you can see that from this graph here. You've got essentially 0.17 on birdies and then 0.165 on bogeys. So there's just a bit more birdies and bogeys, but doubles are a lot more than eagles just because of all the water. You can make a big number fairly quickly here. Rounding out these graphs, the driving accuracy was something that kind of surprised me, because if you're clubbing down, you would think you would be hitting more fairways. Not the case here. So I don't know if they're more narrow or what, but driving accuracy is not is not common here. It's yeah. It kind of befuddles me, to be honest. When you think of a club down course, you're thinking just put it in the fairway to attack the green, but it's not the case at this course. We talked about the greens; them being smaller, so that makes a little bit more sense here. And your green and regulation percentage is a lot lower than the average tour event, and because of that, scrambling is higher here. 3 putts per round, probably no surprise with the fact that these greens are small. That even if you're the furthest away, it's not as bad as a typical tour event. I mean, they do happen, but that's why you see the lower amount of 3 putts. So that's why I'm going to put a bit of emphasis on putting to see who can really make the 10 to 15, 15 to 20 foot putts, because that's where the hay is going to be made with the putter this week. Driving distance is higher than the average tour event. So again, it kind of baffles me, because as I went through the Pro Visualizer, there looked like there was a lot of forced layups, say 275, 280 drives, and this is saying that it's not the case. So clearly, Pro Visualizer and Fantasy National are at odds with each other. That's why I'm a bit I don't want to say flustered, just confused, I guess, because Fantasy National is saying that you hit it far and fairway be damned, where that's not what Pro Visualizer was saying. Although I think I could this probably signifies the water coming into play on the holes where water comes into play off the tee. That probably makes a lot more sense now that I'm thinking about it. If you're wayward with the driver, then you get into trouble real quick. But it is certainly a risk-reward course. I do know that. So, and then the last thing here, because of the smaller greens, you've got a lot closer proximity to the hole. So, generally, if you are hitting the greens, you're going to be a lot closer than the normal tour event. Sorry, I'm getting something off the mouse pad there. And then again, I don't pay a lot of attention to the distance of birdie putts made unless, there's a stark contrast. Clearly, it's not a lot of them are coming from 0 to 5 feet, but there's no astronomical difference or upward swing from course to average tour event. So the driving, I'll have to, just full transparency, I'm going to have to do some research on the driving distance for tomorrow's data, because we'll see if we can dig into it tonight. But this is kind of interesting. I'm imagining the water's coming into play here, but if that's the case, then guys would club down, and you would think that the distance would be lower. So that's interesting. But there's the course breakdown for TPC Southwind. We are going to, let's take a look at the tournament history here and see if we can figure out what's going on with that driving situation. So I'll start with 2019. Your winner was Brooks Koepka. And you'll notice the theme here. Brooks won and tied for second. So Brooks really likes this place. Fitzpatrick, we saw, who putted on Bermuda well. He's been 4th and 6th. But in 2019, the first year the WGC came to TPC Southwind, you had Brooks, Webb, Mark Leishman, and then Fitzpatrick, Fleetwood, and Rory tied for 4th. Poulter and Horschel rounded out the top 10. And then as you come down to the bottom of the board, well, a lot of these players didn't play. So you had Max Homa, who participated. That's about it. Phil Mickelson, Bryson, Kevin Na didn't really play all that well in 2019. And then 2020, your defending champion is Justin Thomas. And he did, 2019 was no slouch either. He won in 18, he won in 20, and tied for 12th in 2019. So he's comfortable with the area, that's for sure. Brooks, we talked about. Phil Mickelson had a really good tournament last year, not so much in 2019. Berger did not play in 2019, so his strokes gained are all from basically 2020. Fitzpatrick, we talked about. Louis, Lowry's only been here once and played well. Webb. So of the guys that are in the field, there's your look at who have played this the best of the past 2 years, which again, we're only looking at 2020 and 2019 because that's when WGC South St. Jude came to TPC Southwind. Before that, it was at Firestone, as you can see here, which now that we'll come to the past tournament conditions, as we talked about, we're on Bermuda. Fantasy National is classified as less than 7,200 for both years. And you saw that the tournament fact sheet for 2020 actually listed it a little bit above 7,200, so it's right around in that range. The greens have consistently been fast, coming to either Firestone or TPC Southwind, so you can pretty much be sure that the green speeds will be fast. Scoring relative to par has been average, as we talked about. Maybe slightly easier than more difficult, but nothing that would classify it as easy. Hitting fairways was average to difficult. So there's your look at the past tournament conditions. Again, I'm really only focused on 2019 and 2020. Score relative to par was average, less than 7,200, Bermuda, and fast green speeds. So I'm actually going to exit out of that tab and come back to here. And let's just kind of take a look at course length. And we'll sort by strokes gained total on short courses. And so in the past 36 rounds, Daniel Berger is actually the number one strokes gained total. Then Webb Simpson, Patrick Cantlay, Bryson, and Rory are your top 5 on short courses. So if we combine that with short and Bermuda for then you come up with Matthew Fitzpatrick, which again has had very good success here at TPC Southwind. Webb Simpson has had good success. Sam Burns, Billy Horschel, Sung Jae, Ian Poulter, Tommy Fleetwood, Cam Davis, Rory, and Kevin Kisner are the top 10 for short courses with Bermuda greens. So that's just an interesting way to look at it there. Let's go back and take a look at the tournament history. See if we can't figure out what the off the tee numbers looked like here. So let's go by fairways and greens, and let's look at the driving distance. This is for 2019. You can see here that Bubba Watson led that event in driving distance and finished in the top 10, so that was fairly important. Surprisingly, Bryson, I mean, it's not surprising that he was second in distance, but apparently he just didn't play well that week, as he was he only finished 48th, which is pretty low on the leaderboard. But you see here the top, what was this, 8 in driving distance? Of the top 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Of the top 7 in driving distance, 5 of the 7 came in the top 12. So driving distance really clearly played a factor in 2019 for top of the leaderboard finishes. Conversely, if you were at the bottom of the distance, you weren't finishing all that high. So that's something to keep in mind. So when we took a look at that graph here for TPC Southwind, that driving distance, it looks like you're going to need some driving distance to be successful here for the top end finishes. Let's take a look at 2020 and see if there's any differences here. So we'll sort by driving distance again for 2020. Bryson led by miles and still only tied for 30th. Cameron Champ was 25th. Brooks, who tied for second, was 3rd. So last year it was not as imperative to be maxed out on distance. You can see certainly you wanted to gain some. Tom Lewis tied for second, was top 10 or 11 in driving distance. Shane Lowry was 6th, top 15 or so. But it didn't preclude you from a top finish. As you can see, actually, we scroll down, the winner, Justin Thomas, was actually below field average in driving distance. Not by much, but he technically was hitting the ball less off the tee than the others and was still winning. Now, you can see, fairways, good drives, greens in regulation. So he's probably top 5 in most of those categories, but it didn't preclude you from a high finish last year. You had a lot more variance here on the driving distance. So if we do that, and we'll take a look at just the strokes gained views here. Let's off the tee for last year. Yeah, there's not a lot of high finishes here in the top 5 or 6 or so. You got Xander's the highest finish. He's 7th, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 7th in strokes gained off the tee and finished 6th. But everybody else above him, was tied 20th or less. And again, with this being a small field, tie for 20th is it's about beating about 2/3 of the field. That's it. So you come down here, certainly you want to be positive in the strokes gained off the tee, but it's not the be-all, end-all. So if we take a look at approach, I imagine, yeah. So this is where people make their hay. You have to be dialed in with your irons. Absolutely dialed in with your irons. And you can see how, Justin Thomas, who's normally not a great putter, he can get hot with the putter, but more often than not, he is on the cold side of it, I mean, he's still able to withstand a losing 2 strokes on the green and still win because he's that good with his irons that week. He was good off the tee. He was really good around the green. That's another thing that's going to be very important is your ability to scramble. So we'll take a look at that here in a second. But last year, your approach is, I mean, look at these top finishes here. The leader in strokes gained approach tied for second, then a first, a sixth. Joel Damon actually top 20 with a lot of approach, but he did not play well around the green, and that's probably what killed him. He probably didn't scramble very well. We can take a look at that here in a bit. But he was very good with the irons, just couldn't chip, and didn't putt very well either. But again, after that top 20, you got a tie for second, 2 tied for 15th, a 12th, a 6th. So strokes gained approach is going to be the name of the game here, which I like. That's the kind of golfer that I prefer. We'll just look at putting here real quick. Matthew Fitzpatrick, again, he's had solid success here at this course. Phil Mickelson putted well to a tied for second, but putting isn't going to be all end all, especially if you're not hitting your irons very well. Brendan Todd, always a very good putter. Should have listed him in the category with Adam Hadwin on good putters. He can kind of make up for some things with how good his putting is, how good he is around the green. His off the tee numbers are always going to be low, but he's a fairway finder. He's never going to have the distance. He just doesn't have the distance that these other guys have. So he has to hit in the fairway. If he doesn't hit in the fairway, he just doesn't have a lot of chance. Conversely, if we look down here, obviously if you're losing a lot putting, you're generally not going to have a high finish. But look at Ches Reavie here. I mean, he loses 5 strokes on the green and still ties for 6th. So that's pretty incredible, if you ask me. It's pretty darn incredible. So that just shows you how much the irons are going to be in play this week. You're going to need to be able to chip. I mean, yeah, there you go. So there's some more good information there. Xander was great around the greens that week. Generally, he's not. Shane Lowry, Justin Thomas, there's Ches, Ricky. So, again, you're going to have to be good around the green. You're going to have to hit your irons very well. Because we're still on 2020, let's look at, I think it's under this. Nope. I apologize. Fairways, birdies are better. Is it back to that? No. Sand saves. Well, I just want scrambling. Where is that? Birdie or better? Nope. Sorry, guys. Let me get here. Well, we'll take a look at the proximity because we saw where 150 to 175 and 175 to 200 were the two major approach ranges. And you can see here from this range, you have 3 of the top 4 were top 6 or better. Justin Thomas was about 10th. So the big outlier is Sebastian Soderberg was very good from this range, and didn't end up with a high finish because he wasn't very good from the longer distance. Now you have Ches, who was good from both. Joel Damon was good from both. DJ was good from both. Justin Thomas was good from one. Not necessarily great. He was bad from the other, but not terribly bad. Not to the level of, say, Jordan Spieth, JT Poston, Bezaden Hoot, such. So that's interesting to see how those line up with the strokes gained approach total. This is telling me that just strokes gained approach is going to be much more important than narrowing in on the proximities per se. I'm probably going to want to take a look at it just to make sure someone's not, astronomically terrible at it. You don't want to get a Matt Jones from 2020 or a Landry, but it doesn't look like you necessarily have to do well from both. Joel Damon here shows he was very good from 150 to 175. He was good from 175 to 200 and still top 20. Shez was the outlier. Brooks wasn't great from here. Phil wasn't great from here. So it's interesting to see. Let's take a look at 2019 just to see. We're gonna go to proximity. Let's look at 150 to 175. So your top two guys who are the best at the two ranges, T27 and T20. Now the next three, third, second, ninth, which is pretty important, but it's showing you that you don't have to be great at both to get a very high finish. Now these three were, but let's look at the winner, Brooks. He was actually negative from 150 to 175. He was just outstanding from 175 to 200. So it looks like you don't have to be great at both. I'm still going to look at them just to see, make sure you don't have somebody like a Nate Lashley or a Phil Erickson, Billy Horschel. Look at that. Billy Horschel tied for 10th and was bad from both ranges. So that tells you right there it's not the be-all, end-all. It looks like it's just flat-out strokes gained approach. Let's look at, I believe it was here. Yeah. No, we've looked at greens or the distance. Let's, that was just strokes gained. Yeah. So strokes gained approach. Kisner led. Didn't do much of anything else. Could make a putt. Wasn't great off the tee, but he was on fire with his irons. Played to tied for 27th. But look at these single digits here in the top 10 on an approach. A third, 11th, a 12th, a second. Adam Scott, who didn't do a fucking thing else that week, just hit the irons great. 40th and 4th, 9th. Brooks there. So again, reinforcing the fact that approach play is going to be the main factor here. Around the green, less so than 2020 for sure, but still important. You have an 8th, a 4th. Your winner actually was negative by quite a bit. Brooks, almost at the bottom. That's interesting. Looks like, oh, yeah, there you go. That's why. He made every single putt under the sun. So when you're doing that, you're going to win. I'd imagine to say that 9.3 is going to be the leading putter. I'd be very comfortable. Yeah. Yep. So putting, look at that. Five of the top 6 were 8th or better in putting in 2019. So we saw in 2020 it wasn't that important. 2019 it was, but the consistency has been the driving distance from the 2 years so far. So that's very, very important to note. That and approach, driving distance and approach. I want to take a look at some par 4 stuff here real quick. Mainly the 400 to 450. I believe that was what, wasn't it? 400 to 450? No, 450 to 500. Good thing I checked. Let's take a look at 450 to 500. You got, this is 2019, so Hatton, Rory, Rahm, Brooks, so 3 of the top 4 are top 10s, and then 2 more here, Webb and Horschel. So looks like they played those par 4s very, very well. Let's look at 2020 par 4 efficiency. So the top 3 actually were, fairly middling. Then you had these 3 that were good. So 2019 was a big factor. 2020, not really. I mean, Justin Thomas was okay, but he wasn't great. So interesting stuff there. Interesting stuff. I like it. It's going to be a fun research for this week. Fun research for this week. So I'm going to take off the tournament history stuff there. Again, there's the fact sheet if you want to take a look. I'm going to take one more quick look, see if they've updated and brought up the 2021. They haven't. So I'll bring that off. And let's dig around just a little bit now that we've seen what is important. Let's just look at strokes gained approach. Make sure I don't have any filters on here. I don't. Just a quick sort on strokes gained approach, since that was clearly the biggest factor that we saw there in the research of the tournament history. No surprise, Colin Morikawa is the number one. He's probably I don't think there's probably, he is the best iron player in the world. Paul Casey is second, Stuart Sink's third, Spieth's fourth, Berger's fifth of the past 36 rounds, so a base. Let's look and see who's just on fire with their irons at the moment. Morikawa, Oosthuizen, Garcia, Xander, Casey, and then Ancer, Berger, Koepka, Rory, and Carlos Ortiz. Ortiz is a name that's kind of interesting this week. We'll have to see how his prices and odds look and stuff. I looked at DraftKings right before the show. They didn't have the odds up yet, so by tomorrow's Data Dive show, they'll be up, and we can talk about that then. Let's look at, I think it's fairways greens. I want to see scrambling. There it is. Fairways greens. Let's look at a longer term base. Who are the best scramblers in the field this week? It's Brian Harman, Robert Streb, Patrick Reed, no surprise there, Justin Thomas, Matt Jones, Webb Simpson, Cantlay, Oosthuizen, Spieth, and Na are your top 10. And that's a baseline. Cameron Smith, Tommy Fleetwood, two guys that are known for their short game. They're lurking just outside the top 10 there. And if we go, I'll use 12 instead of 8 of guys who are just scrambling really well at the moment. Cantlay, Thomas, Berger, Reed, Bobby Mack, Harman, English, Neiman, Scott, and Aaron Rye, with Kisner 11th. So interesting overlaps there. Clearly some overlap. I think that's going to do it. As again, guys, jump in chat, leave a question in the comments. What do you want to know? What do you want to see in the Data Dive show tomorrow? I want to hear how you did in the Olympics if you bet or played DFS. How'd you do? What strategy did you use? Was it successful? What'd you focus on? So reach out. The social media, the links to my social media are in the description. I'd appreciate a follow. The support's always appreciated. But I think that's going to do it for the initial research show. Tomorrow we'll go in depth with the data. I'll start playing around with the model. I'm actually going to show you this. It's right at the top of the screen here. This mixed condition model I've been really liking. Used it to a lot of success. It led to the Seamus Power hit at the Barbasol. So I'll bring that up tomorrow in the Data Dive and the models and stuff. So until tomorrow and this past week for the Olympics and every week, may all your bets be profitable.